The messenger's warning. The observation deck of Station Meridian hung suspended between stars, a neutral ground where empires met to pretend at civility. Cassian Vorel stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the swirl of distant nebulae through the crystalline viewport. His diplomatic uniform felt too tight, too formal for what he knew was coming. Behind him, the doors hissed open. "Ambassador Theln," he said without turning, recognizing the distinctive rhythm of her footsteps. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Ciara Theln moved to stand beside him, her azure skin catching the starlight in a way that made her seem almost luminous. She was taller than him by half a head, her features sharp and elegant in the way of her people, the Kelrathi. "Your message suggested urgency, Envoy Vorel. My schedule is quite full. Then I'll be direct." Cassian finally turned to face her, and for a moment their eyes met. Hers were amber, flecked with gold, and held an intelligence that had always unsettled him. "The Council is making a grave mistake." Her expression hardened. "If this is another human complaint about trade restrictions, it's about survival." His voice dropped low, intense. "Yours and mine both." Ciara laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is that a threat, Cassian?" The use of his first name caught him off guard. They'd maintained strict formality for the 6 months they'd been meeting across various diplomatic tables. "It's a warning. Your fleets have been massing near the Arcturus sector. We know about the Coalition. The Coalition is a defensive measure." She stepped closer, and he caught the faint scent of something like cinnamon. "Your kind has been aggressive lately, expanding without permission, building where you shouldn't, building in our own territory," Cassian countered. "Tell me, Ciara, do you really believe humanity is the threat here?" Something flickered in her eyes, doubt perhaps, or curiosity. "What I believe doesn't matter. I serve my dominion. And if your dominion is wrong?" The question hung between them like a physical thing. Beyond the viewport, a patrol of Kelrathi warships drifted past, their hulls painted with the spiraling marks of her empire. Cassian watched her watch them, saw the conflict playing across her features. "You speak dangerously." "Human. I speak honestly." He moved closer, close enough that he could see the faint patterns of scales along her neck, delicate as lace. "I didn't ask for this meeting to threaten you. I asked because I think you're smart enough to see what's really happening." "And what is that?" "Your leaders are afraid. They've been watching us, studying us, and they've realized we're not the weak newcomers they thought we were. So they're going to strike first before we become too strong." He paused. "They're going to get a lot of people killed, Ciara, on both sides." She turned away sharply. "You presume much. I know much." Cassian pulled a small data chip from his pocket. "This contains movement logs of your fleets. Encrypted communications we've intercepted. Your coalition isn't preparing for defense, it's preparing for invasion. If you have such intelligence, why tell me?" Her voice was controlled, but he heard the tremor beneath. "Why not simply prepare your counterstrike?" "Because maybe it doesn't have to come to that." He held out the chip. "Because every war starts with people who could have stopped it but didn't." Ciara stared at the chip but didn't take it. In the silence, Cassian became aware of how alone they were on this deck, how the station's ambient noise seemed distant and dreamlike. The moment stretched taut between them. "You're asking me to betray my people," she said finally. "Quietly, I'm asking you to save them." Her hand reached out, trembling slightly, and for a heartbeat her fingers brushed his as she took the chip. The contact was brief but electric. Their eyes met again, and Cassian saw something shift in her expression, a crack in the diplomatic armor. "If this is discovered, then we both have something to lose." A comm chime interrupted them, harsh and insistent. Ciara stepped back quickly, slipping the chip into her robes. "I must go. The council convenes within the hour." "Ciara." She paused at the door. "Whatever happens, I hope we meet again." She looked back at him, and for just a moment the ambassador's mask fell away entirely. "So do I, Cassian. More than you know." Then she was gone, leaving him alone with the stars and the terrible knowledge that time was running out. Somewhere in the dark, Admiral Holt's fleets were moving into position, preparing for what humanity had always known might come. The storm was gathering, and Cassian feared that all his warnings wouldn't be enough to stop it. The stars outside seemed colder than before. Shadows and secrets, the lower districts of Station Meridian were nothing like the pristine diplomatic levels above. Here, the air recyclers wheezed with age, and the lighting flickered in uneven patterns that cast dancing shadows across corroded walls. Cassian moved through the crowds of traders and drifters, his hood pulled low, heading toward a maintenance sector that officially didn't exist. Ciara was already waiting when he arrived. Pressed into an alcove between massive coolant pipes, she looked different in civilian clothing, smaller somehow, more vulnerable. Her eyes darted nervously toward every sound. "You came," Cassian breathed, relief flooding through him. "I shouldn't have." But she didn't leave. Instead, she pulled out a portable display, her fingers shaking as she activated it. "I accessed the secured files. Cassian, it's worse than you said. The attack is scheduled for next week. 12 human colonies, all at once." The number hit him like a physical blow. 12? That's not military targets. Those are civilian settlements. They want to break your will before you can mobilize. Her voice cracked. "There are children on those worlds. I saw the population reports." Cassian reached out instinctively, his hand covering hers on the display. She didn't pull away. They stood like that for a moment, connected by horror and a growing understanding that transcended their divided loyalties. "Why are you helping me?" he asked softly. Ciara looked up at him, and in the dim light her eyes seemed to shimmer. "Because I met someone who made me question everything I thought I knew. Someone who looked at me and saw a person, not just an alien envoy." Her free hand rose to touch his face, tentative, exploring. "Is that foolish?" "No." Cassian turned his head slightly, pressing into her touch. "It's brave." The space between them evaporated. Their kiss was gentle at first, testing. Two people from different worlds discovering they spoke the same language of longing and fear. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "This complicates things," Ciara whispered. But she was smiling. Really smiling for the first time since he'd met her. Everything was already complicated. Cassian pulled her closer, one arm wrapping around her waist. "We'll figure it out." A sound echoed from deeper in the maintenance corridor, footsteps, measured and deliberate. They broke apart instantly, Cassian's hand moving to the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. Cassian Vorel. The voice was aged but strong. An elderly Kelrathi emerged from the shadows, leaning heavily on a walking staff. His scales had faded to a pale silver, and his movement spoke of great pain barely controlled. "Master Kelrix?" Ciara gasped. "You followed me?" "I have been following you for days, child." The old one's gaze moved between them, assessing. "I am dying. The wasting sickness has taken root too deep for even your human medicines to cure. So I have nothing to lose by speaking truth." Cassian kept his hand near his weapon but didn't draw it. "What truth would that be?" "That my people have become what we once despised, aggressors hiding behind the mask of defense." Kelrix moved closer, each step clearly agonizing. "I taught Ciara everything she knows about diplomacy and honor. Now I see I taught her well enough that she would risk everything to prevent a massacre. The Council will execute me if they discover this," Ciara said, and Cassian heard the fear beneath her words. "Then we ensure they don't discover it." Kelrix extended a gnarled hand toward Cassian. "I have access to the Coalition's battle plans. Complete fleet movements, command codes, everything. But I cannot transmit them without triggering security alerts. You want me to take them physically," Cassian realized. "I want you to stop this war before it consumes us all." The old philosopher's eyes found Ciara. "And I want her to have a chance. At the future I see growing between you." Ciara moved to her mentor's side, supporting him as he swayed. "Master, you'll be implicated. I am already dead, dear one. Let my final act have meaning." He pressed a data crystal into Cassian's palm. "There is a human facility, yes? Hidden in the asteroid field beyond Vega." Cassian hesitated only a moment before nodding. The installation was classified, but time for secrets had passed. "Take this to your Admiral Holt. Tell him the Kelrathi Dominion has one person of conscience left in its leadership." Kelrix's breathing had become labored. "And tell him that not all of us want this war." The old one's legs gave out. Cassian caught him on one side while Ciara supported the other, lowering him gently to the deck. His eyes were already glazing, but he managed to focus on them one last time. "Protect each other," he whispered. "The galaxy has enough hatred. It needs more." His voice faded to nothing. Ciara's grief was silent but total, her whole body shaking against Cassian as he held her. He tucked the data crystal away and simply let her mourn, one hand stroking her hair while the station hummed around them. "We have to move," he said eventually, gently. "If someone finds him here, finds us—" "I know." She straightened, wiping her eyes. When she looked at him now, something had changed. The last vestiges of the ambassador were gone, replaced by someone raw and real and terrified. "I can't go back. They'll know he told me something before he died. They'll interrogate me. Then don't go back." Cassian took her face in both hands, making her meet his eyes. "Come with me. Right now. There's a transport leaving for the Vega sector in 20 minutes. You're asking me to abandon everything, my career, my people, my entire life. I'm asking you to survive." He kissed her forehead, then her lips, gentle and fierce at once. "And maybe, if we're lucky, to help me save both our peoples." Shiara closed her eyes, and he felt the moment of decision pass through her like an electric current. When she opened them again, they held determination mixed with terror. "Then we run. Together." They left Kelrix in the shadows, a final guardian watching over secrets that might save the galaxy. As they navigated the maze of lower corridors toward the transport bays, Cassian kept Ziara close. His awareness split between the tactical necessity of escape and the woman pressed against his side. Everything had changed in a matter of days. He'd entered this posting as a simple envoy. Now he was running through the dark with classified intelligence and a defector he was falling dangerously in love with. The transport bay loomed ahead, and beyond it, a small ship bearing false credentials that would get them to human space. To Admiral Holt, to whatever came next. Shiara's hand found his as they approached the ship. She squeezed once and he squeezed back. The galaxy was about to burn, but perhaps in the ashes something new could grow. The breaking point, the command deck of the EHS Relentless thrummed with controlled chaos. Admiral Marcus Holt stood at the center of it all, a granite pillar amid the storm, his steel-gray eyes fixed on the tactical display that showed 17 Kelrathi fleets converging on human space. "Admiral, the colonies are reporting multiple contacts." The communications officer's voice remained steady despite the circumstances. "They're coming in fast." "Not fast enough." Holt's fingers moved across the command console. "Execute Blackfall Protocol. All fleets, weapons free." Beside him, Cassian watched the display with growing horror. "Sir, there might still be time to—" "There's no time, envoy." Holt's voice was ice. "They made their choice when they launched. Now we make ours." Across the deck, hidden in an observation blister, Shiara pressed her hands against the transparent aluminum, watching her people's fleets advance toward annihilation. She'd given the humans everything: fleet positions, command frequencies, tactical doctrines. Kelrix's sacrifice had made her a traitor twice over. The first human vessels appeared from behind the moon, dark and silent as hunting sharks. "Contact," someone called out. Multiple human signatures decloaking across all sectors. Shiara's breath caught. She'd known humanity was preparing, but seeing it unfold was different. Human ships materialized from the void like predators that had been waiting just beyond sight. They didn't charge forward with flags flying. They simply appeared, positioned perfectly, and opened fire. The first Kelrathi cruiser died in silence, its shields overwhelmed before it could even return fire. Then another. And another. "It's a massacre," she whispered. On the command deck, Cassian closed his eyes. This was what he'd tried to prevent. Not the battle itself, but the inevitability of it. Holt was right. There had been no other choice once the coalition launched, but that didn't make the deaths any easier to witness. "Sir, we're receiving a wideband transmission from the coalition commander, General Korath Ven." The communications officer looked pale. "He's demanding we cease fire and negotiate." "Now he wants to negotiate," Holt said grimly, "after attacking our civilian colonies." "Tell him—" "Admiral, wait." Cassian stepped forward. "Let me speak to him. If there's any chance to stop this before more die." Holt studied him for a long moment, then nodded curtly. "You have 30 seconds." The view screen shifted to show General Korath Ven, his crimson scales marked with the scars of 100 battles. His expression was a mixture of rage and dawning horror as he saw his fleets being carved apart. "Humans, we sue for peace. Cease your—" "You don't get peace by attacking first and begging second," Cassian interrupted, his voice hard. "You wanted war, General. We're giving it to you. You don't understand what you've unleashed." Korath's composure cracked. "The full might of the coalition will—" Is currently burning. Cassian leaned forward. We tried to warn you. We tried diplomacy. You chose to see us as weak. Now you see the truth. An explosion blossomed behind Korath, and his ship shuddered violently. Static filled the screen briefly before clearing to show chaos on the Kelrathi bridge. All fleets fall back. Korath roared. Emergency jump. Scatter formation. The transmission cut to black as his flagship took a direct hit to its core. Shiara's legs gave out. She slid down the viewport, trembling. Those were her people dying out there. People she'd known, trained with, laughed with. The weight of her betrayal crashed over her like a wave. The door to the observation blister hissed open. Cassian found her there, curled in on herself, silent tears streaming down her face. He knelt beside her without a word, gathering her into his arms. I did this, she choked out. All those deaths, they did this. His voice was firm but gentle. By choosing to attack colonies, you saved thousands of humans, Yara, probably millions. Does that make the Kelrathi lives worth less? No, he held her tighter. But it makes you brave enough to choose the harder, right over the easier wrong. On the main display, the battle was turning into a rout. Human vessels pursued the fleeing coalition forces with mechanical precision, destroying ships that tried to regroup and allowing those in full retreat to escape. It was a demonstration of power wrapped in restraint. Humanity showing it could annihilate the coalition entirely, but choosing to let survivors carry word back to their empires. An alarm blared suddenly. Multiple contacts bearing 274. It's a second wave, larger than the first. Admiral Holt's jaw tightened. They held reserves. Clever. The tactical display lit up with new signatures. This wasn't a scattered fleet anymore. It was a hammer coming down with the full weight of the coalition behind it. Reinforcements from a dozen different empires, all converging on the human position. All ships, regroup, Holt commanded. Prepare for close engagement. And someone get me Dr. Blackwell. If her new weapon systems work, now's the time to find out. Cassian helped Giara to her feet. We need to get to the shelters. No. She wiped her eyes, and he saw steel beneath the grief. I need to be on the bridge. I know Kelrathi tactics. Maybe I can... An impact rocked the ship, throwing them both against the bulkhead. Emergency klaxons wailed as the Relentless shuddered under sustained fire. Hull breach on deck 7, someone shouted. Shields at 60%. Cassian grabbed Ziara's hand and ran. They burst onto the command deck just as another salvo struck home. Holt remained unmoved at his station, calmly issuing orders as his ship fought for survival. Admiral, let me help, Ziara called out over the chaos. The third fleet in that formation. Their commander is Vornis Kale. He's brilliant but predictable. He'll try to envelope your left flank. Holt glanced at her, then at Cassian, making a split-second decision. Then we let him think he's succeeding. Fleet 7, fall back. Make it look ragged. The human ships on the left began to drift, their formation appearing to collapse under pressure. The Kelrathi fleet surged forward, eager to exploit the weakness. Now, Giara whispered. Now, Holt confirmed. Fleet 7, full burn. Hit them from below. The retreating human ships suddenly accelerated, diving beneath the Kelrathi formation and firing upward into their vulnerable undersides. Simultaneously, 2 more human fleets appeared from behind nearby asteroids, catching the enemy in a perfect crossfire. Shiara watched the tactic she'd suggested work with devastating efficiency. More Kelrathi ships died, and each one carved another piece out of her soul. But she didn't look away. She owed them that much, to witness the consequences of her choices. Cassian's hand found hers beneath the command console, squeezing gently. In the midst of battle, that small touch was an anchor to something beyond the violence. They're breaking, the tactical officer reported. Coalition forces are scattering. Let them run, Holt ordered. But track every ship that retreats. I want to know where they go, what they report. He turned to face Shiara fully for the first time. Ambassador Thelen, your intelligence saved lives today. Human lives, yes, but also Kelrathi lives. This could have been much worse. I don't feel like I saved anyone, Admiral. You will. Eventually. Holt's expression softened fractionally. War is never clean, but sometimes choosing which war to fight is the only honor left to us. The battle wound down into an eerie quiet. Damaged ships limped toward repair stations while others maintained defensive perimeters. The debris field stretched for thousands of kilometers, a graveyard of metal and shattered dreams. Cassian and Ziara left the bridge together as the crew shifted to damage control operations. They walked in silence through corridors scarred by combat, past emergency teams tending to wounded. In a quiet observation deck far from the command section, they finally stopped. "I can never go home," Ziara said quietly, staring at the wreckage floating outside. "Everything I was, it's gone." Cassian pulled her close, his chin resting on top of her head. "Then we build something new, together." She turned in his arms, looking up at him with eyes that held both sorrow and fierce determination. "Promise me something. Anything. Promise that when this is over, if we survive, we'll find a way to make it mean something. All this death, all this sacrifice, it has to lead somewhere better." He kissed her then, deep and desperate, a promise sealed in the language of touch. When they finally broke apart, both knew that the war was far from over. But they also knew they would face whatever came next together. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant, indifferent to the struggles of those who sailed between them. But for Cassian and Ziara, the universe had narrowed to this moment, this connection, a fragile bridge of hope spanning the void between their peoples. The breaking point had passed. Now came the aftermath. Ashes and aftermath. The medical bay of the Relentless smelled of disinfectant and burnt flesh. Dr. Nora Blackwell moved between beds with practiced efficiency, her hands steady despite 3 days without sleep. Human and alien wounded lay side by side, their injuries making no distinction between species, pressures dropping on the Kelrathi and Bay 3, a nurse called out. "Compensate with the blue serum. Their blood chemistry needs copper-based. Stabilizers." Nora's voice was hoarse but firm. She'd been the one to insist on saving enemy wounded, overriding objections from security. "All lives, Lieutenant. That's what I swore." In the corner, Ziara sat with a young Kelrathi pilot, holding his hand as he drifted in and out of consciousness. His ship had been torn apart in the battle, and he'd been recovered from an escape pod, more dead than alive. The Council, they said humans were monsters. The pilot whispered in Kelrathi. "They lied to us both," Ziara replied softly. "Rest now." Cassian found her there an hour later, still maintaining her vigil even though the pilot had fallen into deep sleep. He brought 2 cups of station coffee, pressing one into her hands. "You should rest. So should you." But she accepted the coffee, wrapping both hands around the warm cup. "How many did we lose?" 43 human ships. Unknown number of crew." Cassian sat beside her on the medical cot. "Coalition losses were worse. Much worse." Ziara closed her eyes. "Do you ever wonder if we chose right? If there was some other path we missed?" Before he could answer, alarms shrieked through the bay. Emergency lighting bathed everything in red as the ship shuddered from a new impact. "All hands to battle stations. We have raiders. Looks like Kelrathi extremists." Cassian pulled Ziara to her feet. "We need to get you to safety." "No." She grabbed a medical kit from the nearby shelf. "I'm needed here." The next impact threw them both to the deck. Through the viewport, a small strike force of Kelrathi ships appeared, darting between the human fleet with suicidal determination. These weren't military vessels. They were civilian craft modified for combat. Jury-rigged weapons blazing. "They're targeting our medical ships," someone shouted in horror. Dr. Blackwell's face went white. "Those bastards. They're going after our wounded." A young officer, Captain Julian Cross, burst into the medical bay, his uniform scorched from a fire on the lower decks. "Dr. Blackwell, we need to evacuate." "The raiders are trying to board this section. I'm not leaving my patients. That's not a request." Cross stopped as he saw Ziara. His hand moved to his sidearm. "Is that one of them?" "She's with me," Cassian said, stepping between them. "She's given us more intelligence than our entire spy network." "She's Kelrathi." Cross's voice was hard. "How do we know this isn't a setup?" An explosion somewhere close made the decision for them. The bulkhead groaned, and emergency seals began to slam shut, sectioning off the compromised areas. "We're cut off," Nora said grimly. "And if those raiders breach this section, wounded or not, they'll kill everyone in here." Cassian moved to the door controls, examining the defense options. "We can hold them here. This section has emergency barriers and 15 wounded who can't fight," Cross interrupted. He made a decision, tossing his spare weapon to Cassian. "Fine, we hold here, but she," he gestured at Ziara, "stays where I can see her." The next minutes dissolved into chaos. The raiders cut through the outer bulkhead with plasma torches, filling the corridor beyond with smoke and heat. Cassian positioned himself at the medical bay entrance while Cross covered the secondary access point. When the raiders finally breached, they came in firing. Cassian dropped the first two with precise shots, but more poured through. These weren't soldiers. They were civilians driven by rage and grief, wielding weapons they barely knew how to use. Stop. Shara's voice cut through the gunfire. She stood in the center of the bay, arms spread wide, speaking in rapid Kelrathi. "These people are healing our wounded." "Look, your own pilots lie in those beds." One raider, a female Kelrathi with marking of the merchant class, hesitated. Her weapon lowered slightly as she saw her people among the injured humans. "They destroyed our fleets," she said, but her voice wavered. "They killed thousands." "And we attacked their colonies first," Ziara replied, stepping forward despite Cassian's warning gesture. "I was there. I saw the orders. Our leaders chose this war. You're a traitor. I'm someone trying to stop more death." Ziara moved closer, close enough to touch the raider's weapon. "Please, look at what the humans are doing here. They're saving our wounded, giving them the same care as their own. Is that the behavior of monsters?" The standoff stretched taut. Cassian kept his weapon trained but didn't fire, trusting Ziara's judgment even as his heart hammered against his ribs. Cross wasn't so patient. His finger tightened on the trigger. Dr. Blackwell stepped forward, moving to stand beside Ziara. "I don't care what species you are or why you came here, but if you fire weapons in my medical bay, you'll kill patients of both our peoples. Is that what you want? More death?" The raider looked at Nora, then at Ziara, then at the beds where Kelrathi and human wounded lay side by side. Something broke in her expression. Her weapon clattered to the deck. "What have we done?" she whispered. The other raiders lowered their weapons one by one, the rage draining out of them to be replaced by exhausted grief. They'd come seeking vengeance and found only more tragedy. "We've all done terrible things," Ziara said gently, taking the raiders' hands in hers. "The question is what we do next." Security teams arrived moments later, taking the raiders into custody. But Cassian noted that Nora specifically requested they be held in cells near the medical bay, and that their wounded leader receive treatment for burns on her arms. As the adrenaline faded, Cassian found himself leaning against a bulkhead, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. Shiara came to him, sliding under his arm, fitting against his side as if she'd always belonged there. "You trusted me," she said quietly. "When that raider had her weapon up, you didn't shoot. You trusted me to talk her down." "Of course I did." He kissed the top of her head. "I love you." The words surprised them both. Shiara pulled back to look up at him, her eyes wide. "Say that again." "I love you," Cassian repeated, cupping her face in his hands. "I know it's insane. I know it's impossible. But somewhere between diplomatic meetings and running for our lives, I fell in love with you." Shiara's laugh was half sob. "It's completely insane. We're from different species. We're in the middle of a war. My people consider me a traitor and yours aren't sure whether to trust me. And I love you too, you foolish human." She pulled him down into a kiss that tasted of tears and smoke and desperate hope. Captain Cross cleared his throat awkwardly from across the bay. "Sir, I apologize for doubting." "Well, you vouch for her and what she did with those raiders." He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "Just wanted you to know, it's noted in my report that she saved lives today." After he left, Cassian and Ziara found a quiet corner of the observation deck. They sat together on the deck plates, backs against the bulkhead, watching the debris field slowly drift past. "What happens now?" Ziara asked. "The coalition is broken, but the hatred remains. My people will want revenge for their losses. Some will. But others saw what you showed those raiders, that not all humans are enemies, just as not all Kelrathi wanted this war." Cassian laced his fingers through hers. "Change starts small. One person, one choice at a time. Starting with us?" "Starting with us," he confirmed. "We're proof it's possible. A human and a Kelrathi working together, trusting each other. If we can bridge that gap, maybe others can too." Shiara rested her head on his shoulder. Outside, a salvage team was carefully recovering bodies from both sides, treating each with equal respect. It was a small thing, but it mattered. In the medical bay, Dr. Blackwell continued her work, saving lives without counting species. Captain Cross filed his report, including commendation for Ziara's bravery. And in a holding cell, a Kelrathi raider-turned-prisoner thought about human doctors healing her burns while she'd come to kill them. Seeds of change planted in ashes. The war wasn't over. But perhaps, just perhaps, this was the beginning of its end. A new dawn 6 months later, Station Unity hung in the void between human and Kelrathi space. A marvel of combined engineering, built from the wreckage of warships turned into symbols of peace. Its corridors bustled with traffic from a dozen species, all watching nervously as history unfolded. Cassian adjusted his formal uniform one more time, earning a gentle laugh from Ziara. "You look fine," she assured him, smoothing an imaginary wrinkle from his shoulder. "More than fine. I'm about to address representatives from every major empire in the galaxy." Fine doesn't quite cover it. But he smiled, catching her hand and bringing it to his lips. "At least I'll have you beside me. Always," she promised. The council chamber was a circular amphitheater designed to give no species prominence. Admiral Holt stood near the human delegation. His stern expression softened slightly as Cassian and Ziara entered. Across the chamber, Ambassador Theris Cole represented the new Kelrathi government, a coalition of moderates who'd risen from the ashes of the old regime. "The session will come to order." The automated system spoke in multiple languages simultaneously. "We gather to address the proposal for the Interspecies Accord of 2326. Cassian stepped to the central podium, very aware of every eye upon him. Ziara stood just behind him, her presence a steady anchor. "6 months ago, we were at war," he began, his voice carrying through the chamber. "The coalition attacked human colonies, and humanity responded with overwhelming force. Thousands died. Both sides lost friends, family, entire communities." He paused, letting the weight of those losses settle. "We could have continued that path. Humanity had the advantage. We could have pressed it, burned more fleets, occupied worlds." Murmurs rippled through the alien delegations. Some angry, some fearful, but we didn't. Because destruction isn't strength, it's just destruction. Real strength is knowing when to extend a hand instead of a fist. Cassian gestured to Ziara. Ambassador Thelen risked everything to prevent that war from spreading. Her mentor, Master Kelrix, sacrificed his life to give us the intelligence we needed. And in the aftermath on both sides, we found people who chose compassion over revenge. Ambassador Cole rose from his seat. "Envoy Varel speaks truly. The old council lied to our people, told us humans were a threat that must be eliminated. But they were wrong. We were the aggressors, and humanity showed restraint even in victory." His voice strengthened. "The Kelrathi Dominion formally apologizes for the attack on human colonies. We seek not just peace, but partnership." The chamber erupted in debate. Some delegations supported the accord immediately. Others protested that humanity was too dangerous to trust. Through it all, Cassian and Ziara stood together, a living symbol of what was possible. During a recess, they walked through the station's observation gardens, a beautiful hybrid space where earth plants grew alongside Kelrathi crystal flowers. Admiral Holt found them there, hands clasped behind his back. "The vote will be close," he said without preamble. "Some empires will never trust us. But some will," Cassian replied. "That's what matters." Holt studied them both, then nodded slowly. "I was wrong about you, Envoy. When you first came aboard with her, I thought you were a liability. Turns out you were exactly what we needed." He extended his hand to Ziara. "Ambassador, your courage saved more lives than any weapon I could have deployed." Ziara shook his hand, startled. "Thank you, Admiral. That means a great deal. Don't waste it," Holt said gruffly. "The galaxy's watching you two. Make it count." When voting resumed, the chamber held its breath. One by one, delegations cast their votes. Some for, some against, each decision carrying the weight of history. Finally, the count was complete. The accord passed by a narrow margin. Cheers erupted from the human and Kelrathi sections. Other delegations responded with polite applause or studied silence. It wasn't unanimous support, but it was a beginning. That evening, Cassian and Ziara stood on an observation deck watching. Ships from various species dock at Station Unity. The sight was surreal. Vessels that had been enemies months ago, now moored peacefully side by side. "We did it," Ziara breathed, leaning into Cassian's embrace. "It's really happening. The first step anyway." He turned her to face him, his expression serious. There will be setbacks. Prejudice doesn't die overnight. Some on both sides will never accept this. Then we keep working. Keep showing them another way is possible. She smiled up at him. Speaking of which, I have news. Good news, I hope. That depends on your perspective. Ciara's smile turned mischievous. Dr. Blackwell has been appointed Chief Medical Officer for Station Unity. She's asked me to help establish joint training protocols for medical staff. That's wonderful. It means I'll be staying here, permanently. She took his hands in hers. And I was hoping, that is, if you're not opposed, you might consider staying too? Cassian's answer was a kiss that conveyed everything words couldn't. Love, commitment, hope for a future they would build together. When they finally broke apart, both were laughing. I'll take that as a yes, Ciara said. Definitely a yes. They were interrupted by Captain Cross, who'd been promoted to Station Security Chief. Sorry to interrupt, but you'll want to see this. He gestured them to a communications terminal. The screen showed a transmission from a remote colony world, one that had been attacked in the war's opening days. The speaker was a human woman, standing beside a Kelrathi engineer. This is Freetown Colony checking in. We've just completed repairs to our main power grid, thanks to assistance from Kelrathi relief workers. Just wanted everyone to know. We're rebuilding. Together. More messages followed from across the galaxy. A human medical team treating plague victims on a Kelrathi world. A joint mining operation where former enemies worked side by side. A school where children of multiple species learned together. Each message was small in itself. But together, they formed a tapestry of change. It's spreading, Cross said quietly. What you started here, it's actually spreading. Cassian felt Ciara's hand squeeze his, and he knew she felt the same overwhelming emotion. They hadn't ended prejudice or erased centuries of distrust, but they'd cracked open a door, let in a sliver of light. Others were walking through it now, carrying that light further. Months became a year. Station Unity grew, adding sections, welcoming new species to the Accord. Cassian and Ciara became fixtures in the corridors, known for their tireless advocacy and their public demonstration that different species could not just coexist, but love. They faced opposition, of course. Assassination attempts from extremists on both sides, political maneuvering by those who profited from division, long nights when the progress seemed impossibly slow and the prejudice impossibly deep. But they also had victories. The first human Kelrathi joint business venture, the establishment of cultural exchange programs, a generation of children growing up seeing the other as friends rather than enemies. One evening, 2 years after that first meeting on Station Meridian, Cassian and Ciara stood in their shared quarters overlooking the docking bays. The room was an eclectic mix of human and Kelrathi design, neither trying to dominate, both blending into something new. Do you ever regret it? Cassian asked quietly. Everything you gave up? Ciara considered the question seriously. I regret the circumstances that forced the choice. I regret every life lost in the war. But choosing you, choosing this path. She shook her head. Never. This is where I belong. Even when it's hard? Especially then. She pulled him close, resting her forehead against his. We're building something unprecedented, Cassian. A future where species defined by conflict can redefine themselves through cooperation. That's worth any sacrifice. Through the viewport, a new ship was docking. A joint exploration vessel crewed by humans, Kelrathi, and 3 other species. It would launch next month on a 5-year mission to uncharted space. A mission of discovery rather than conquest. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson written in fire and blood across the stars. Humanity's wrath had been terrible to behold, but their capacity for mercy and their willingness to forgive had proven equally powerful. And in a small quarters on a station built from the ruins of war, 2 people from different worlds held each other and watched the stars. They had been a messenger and an ambassador, then fugitives, then advocates. Now they were simply Cassian and Ciara, proof that bridges could be built across any divide, that love could transcend.